A soccer match that ended with thousands dead.
No, not a riot, a war.
This is the true story of the football war, and trust me, it only gets crazier from here. If you like real stories that sound completely unbelievable, you're going to want to subscribe.
So, to understand how this happened, we have to go back to 1969. You've got two neighboring countries, El Salvador and Honduras, and they are sitting on a tinderbox of tension that's about to explode. You have to understand, this was never, ever just about a game. Okay, so picture this. You have thousands of Salvadorans who've moved into Honduras to find land and work. But a lot of Hondurans are starting to feel resentful. They see them as outsiders, taking their jobs, taking their land. The anger is just simmering under the surface.
This was a powder keg, really. We're talking decades of arguments over land, massive inequality, and a fierce, rising sense of nationalism on both sides. The whole situation was just waiting for a spark.
And that spark, well, it came during the qualifiers for the 1970 World Cup. The first match was set to be played in Honduras, and this is where the fuse was officially lit.
The Salvadoran team showed up to an absolute nightmare. The entire night before the game, a mob surrounded their hotel, screaming, throwing things, making sure they didn't get a single second of sleep. The next day, totally exhausted, they lose the game 1-0. But what happened next shocked everyone. A young Salvadoran fan back home was so devastated by the loss, she took her own life. And overnight, she became a national hero, a martyr.
And just like that, this wasn't about a game anymore. It was about national honor. It was about revenge.
Just 1 week later, it's time for the second match. But this time, it's in El Salvador, and you could just feel the anger in the air. This wasn't about scoring goals. This was about payback.
What the Salvadorans experienced in Honduras, it was nothing compared to this. The Honduran team was terrorized. El Salvador won, easily, 3-0. But the real story was outside the stadium. Absolute hell broke loose. Honduran fans were attacked on sight. Their cars, their homes, their businesses set on fire. People started fleeing for their lives. The entire situation was spiraling into total chaos. If you're still watching, you're going to love what's coming next, so subscribe so you don't miss it.
So with the series tied 1-1, a final playoff match had to be scheduled. It was held on neutral ground in Mexico City. The fate of two nations was about to be decided in one last game.
The match itself was basically a war. It was brutal, back and forth, it goes into extra time, and with just minutes left on the clock, El Salvador scores. They win it, 3-2. You'd think that would be the end of it. Celebration, right? But that win didn't bring peace. In fact, it triggered something else entirely.
On the exact same day they won the most important soccer match in their history, El Salvador officially cut all diplomatic ties with Honduras. The final whistle of the game was basically the starting pistol for a war.
What happened next sent shockwaves across the globe. Because this rivalry didn't end on the field, it was about to move to the battlefield.
And just look at how fast everything fell apart. June 27th, the final match. Less than 3 weeks later, on July 14th, the Salvadoran military launches a full-scale invasion of Honduras. The football war had begun, and it was over almost as fast as it started. A ceasefire was called just 4 days later.
100 hours. That's all the fighting lasted. But in those 4 short days, an estimated 6,000 people were killed.
And the death toll doesn't even begin to tell the whole story. Over 100,000 people were displaced, forced to flee their homes. Lives were shattered. Entire communities were destroyed forever. Subscribe for more stories that sound unbelievable, but are 100% real.
So after all that, the games, the violence, the war, we're left with one really important question.
Was a war that left thousands dead and displaced over 100,000 more really, truly, about a soccer game?
Of course not. The soccer match was just the spark. The fuel for this fire had been piling up for decades. Bitter fights over land, struggles for power, deep, painful inequality, and politicians on both sides fanning the flames. The game just gave all that hatred and anger a place to finally explode.
You know, a game can bring people together, but sometimes it can show us the dangerous cracks just hiding beneath the surface. So was it really just a game, or was it a warning?